You're standing in a well-lit bank lobby, holding a legitimate withdrawal slip, but the teller's eyes are wide with unwarranted panic. Sirens wail in the distance, closing in fast. Within minutes, you're in handcuffs, publicly humiliated. But the officers making the arrest have no idea they just detained the president's lead Secret Service agent. Adrian Cole was exhausted, but it was the kind of bone-deep fatigue that only comes from a job well done. At 42, Adrian was a 20-year veteran of federal law enforcement, spending the last decade serving on the Presidential Protective Division of the United States Secret Service. He had spent the last 72 hours awake, coordinating the security perimeter for an impromptu diplomatic summit in Geneva. Now, back on American soil, and finally off duty, all he wanted to do was close on his dream home in the quiet, affluent suburb of Oak Brook, Illinois. It was a Tuesday morning. The air was crisp, and Adrian had dressed for comfort. A faded navy blue Georgetown University hoodie, dark athletic sweatpants, and a pair of well-worn running shoes. He didn't look like the man who stood inches behind the commander-in-chief. He looked like any other guy running errands on a day off. But as a 6'2" black man, walking into the pristine, marble-floored lobby of Heritage Trust Bank, his casual attire was about to become a dangerous liability in the eyes of the staff. Adrian approached the teller window. The bank was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the clicking of keyboards. He pulled a slip of paper from his pocket and slid it across the polished counter along with his Illinois driver's license. "Good morning," Adrian said, his voice a calm, practiced baritone. "I need to request a cashier's check for $85,000. It's for a house closing this afternoon. The funds should be clear in my primary savings account." The teller, a woman whose name tag read Patricia, glanced at the withdrawal slip, then at the amount, and finally up at Adrian. Her smile, previously warm when greeting the elderly woman before him, instantly stiffened into a tight, professional grimace. She looked down at his driver's license, scrutinizing the photo, then looked back at his hoodie. $85,000, Patricia repeated, her voice dropping a fraction of an octave, laced with a skepticism she didn't bother to hide. "Yes, ma'am," Adrian replied politely. He knew the drill. It was a large transaction, and banks had protocols. He expected to answer security questions. He expected a momentary delay. What he didn't expect was the sheer hostility radiating from her side of the glass. Patricia began typing furiously, her eyes darting between the screen and Adrian. "Mr. Cole, this is a very substantial withdrawal. Can I ask the source of these funds?" "It's a combination of personal savings and the proceeds from the sale of my previous property in Virginia," Adrian explained patiently. "The wire transfer cleared 4 days ago. You should be able to see the deposit history." Patricia didn't nod. She just kept typing. "And what exactly do you do for a living, Mr. Cole?" Adrian kept his expression neutral, though his tactical mind was already registering the shift in the room's atmosphere. "I work for the federal government." "The government," she echoed dryly. She picked up his ID and stood up. "I'm going to need my branch manager to authorize a transaction of this size. Wait right here." She didn't ask. She commanded. Adrian watched as Patricia walked over to a glass-walled office in the corner. Inside sat Caleb Caldwell, a man in his late 50s wearing a sharply tailored grey suit. Patricia leaned in, speaking quietly but urgently, occasionally shooting brief, nervous glances back at Adrian. Caleb Caldwell's eyes locked onto Adrian. The manager's face tightened. He didn't look at a computer screen to verify Adrian's account. He just looked at Adrian. Adrian had spent a career reading body language. He knew what a threat looked like, and he knew what fear looked like. Right now, he was watching two people manufacture a threat out of their own prejudice. Caldwell picked up his desk phone. He didn't dial a bank authorization center. He dialed 3 specific digits. 911. Adrian sighed, shifting his weight. Here we go, he thought. He could have walked out. He could have flashed his credentials right then and there to shut the entire spectacle down. But Adrian was a man of principle. He was a citizen trying to access his own legally obtained money. He hadn't done anything wrong, and he refused to use his federal badge to bypass a situation that an ordinary citizen would be forced to endure. He wanted to see exactly how Heritage Trust Bank treated its customers. 10 minutes passed. The lobby remained eerily quiet. Caldwell finally emerged from his office, walking over to the teller station with a practiced, hollow smile. "Mr. Cole," Caldwell said, his tone dripping with condescension, "we are currently running a routine security check on the account. Given the unusual nature of this request and the amount, it takes a bit of time." "There's nothing unusual about withdrawing my own money, Mr. Caldwell," Adrian said, his voice even, revealing none of his growing frustration. "The funds are fully settled. I have my ID, my debit card, and my social security number for verification. What exactly seems to be the issue?" "It's just bank policy," Caldwell deflected, his eyes nervously darting toward the front glass doors. "We have to protect our clients from fraudulent activities." "Protect our clients?" Adrian thought. "You don't think I'm the client. You think I'm the fraud." "I understand protocol," Adrian replied, leaning slightly against the counter, keeping his hands fully visible, a habit ingrained in him for survival. "But I have a closing at 2 o'clock. I'd appreciate it if we could expedite the verification." Caldwell took a step back, maintaining a defensive distance. "We are moving as fast as we can, sir. I'm going to ask you to step back from the counter and have a seat in the waiting area." It wasn't a request. It was an attempt to manage what Caldwell perceived as a threat. Adrian looked at the manager, then at Patricia, who was staring at her keyboard, avoiding eye contact. "I'll stand, thank you," Adrian said calmly. A moment later, the heavy glass doors of the bank swung open. The heavy, rhythmic thud of combat boots echoed across the marble floor. Adrian didn't need to turn around to know who had arrived. The local police were here. Officers Greg Miller and Thomas Jenkins of the Oak Brook Police Department entered the bank with the kind of urgent, aggressive energy reserved for an active robbery. Miller, the younger of the two, was red in the face, his hand resting instinctively on the butt of his duty weapon. Jenkins, a heavier, older veteran, flanked him, his thumbs tucked into his utility belt. "Officers, thank God!" Caldwell called out, his voice suddenly pitching an octave higher in feigned distress. He pointed a trembling finger directly at Adrian. "That's him. He's been demanding an $85,000 withdrawal. His ID looks fake, and he's refusing to leave." Adrian slowly turned around to face the officers. He made sure both of his hands were completely empty and held away from his body at waist height. He knew the statistics. He knew how quickly movements were misinterpreted. In his line of work, he neutralized threats. Today, he was being treated as one. "Sir, step away from the counter," Officer Miller barked, closing the distance rapidly. "I am the account holder," Adrian stated, his voice projecting clearly across the lobby, calm and authoritative. "My name is Adrian Cole. I am attempting to complete a legal transaction. My verified identification is sitting on that counter." "I said, step away from the counter and put your hands behind your back," Miller yelled, his adrenaline clearly spiking. Jenkins moved in from the left. "Don't make this difficult, buddy. Do what the officer says." Adrian took a single, slow step back. "Officers, I am fully cooperating. But before you proceed, I need to inform you that I am a federal— Shut your mouth, Miller interrupted, grabbing Adrian's right arm with excessive force, twisting it behind Adrian's back. Adrian's instincts screamed at him to break the hold. With his close-quarters combat training, it would take him exactly 2 seconds to disarm the young officer and put him on the ground. But he forced his body to remain entirely limp. He allowed Miller to yank his arm up at an uncomfortable angle. "Officer," Adrian said, gritting his teeth slightly against the joint manipulation, "you are making a significant mistake. I strongly advise you to listen to me. The only one making a mistake is you, coming into this town thinking you could pull off a scam like this," Jenkins sneered as he grabbed Adrian's left arm, slapping a cold pair of steel handcuffs around his wrists. The ratcheting sound of the cuffs locking into place echoed loudly in the now dead-silent bank. The few customers in the lobby watched in stunned silence. Some pulled out their phones, hitting record. "Spread your legs," Miller ordered, kicking the inside of Adrian's ankle hard enough to bruise. Adrian complied, staring straight ahead at the bank manager, Caldwell, who looked incredibly smug. "Enjoy the moment, Caleb," Adrian thought coldly. "It's going to be your last day in finance." Miller began a rapid, aggressive pat-down of Adrian's clothing. He ran his hands down Adrian's sides, checking his pockets. "You got any needles on you? Any weapons?" Miller asked rhetorically. Then Miller's hand brushed against the right hip of Adrian's sweatpants, underneath the oversized hoodie. He felt the hard, unmistakable shape of a specialized holster. Miller jumped back as if he had been burned, his hand flying to his own weapon, unholstering it in a flash. "Gun! He's got a gun! Jenkins, hold him!" Chaos erupted. 2 bank customers screamed. Patricia ducked behind her teller station. Jenkins shoved Adrian violently face first against the marble wall, pressing his forearm into the back of Adrian's neck. "Don't move! Do not move!" Jenkins roared, his previous calm vanishing into sheer panic. Adrian's face was pressed against the cold stone, but his voice remained perfectly steady, cutting through the hysteria like a knife. "It is a Sig Sauer P320. It is holstered. My hands are cuffed behind my back. I am not a threat." Miller, breathing heavily, reached under the hoodie and yanked the firearm from Adrian's waist. He stepped back, holding the weapon up. "Got it. Suspect is disarmed." "Listen to me very carefully," Adrian said, his tone no longer polite, shifting into the commanding cadence of a man who gave orders to tactical assault teams. "In the inside left breast pocket of my hoodie, there is a black leather case. Officer Jenkins, I want you to reach in and pull it out. Do it now." "You don't give the orders here, scammer," Jenkins spat, pressing harder into Adrian's neck. "You're going away for a long time. Armed robbery, fraud. I didn't ask for money. I asked for a cashier's check from my own account," Adrian corrected him sharply. "And if you don't look in that pocket in the next 10 seconds, the next people coming through those doors are going to be a federal response team." The utter lack of fear in Adrian's voice finally made Jenkins pause. The suspect wasn't shaking. He wasn't crying. He wasn't acting erratic. He was talking to them like they were subordinates who had just failed an inspection. Jenkins glanced at Miller. "Check his pocket." Miller holstered his own weapon, approached cautiously, and reached into the left pocket of Adrian's Georgetown hoodie. His fingers closed around a heavy leather wallet. He pulled it out. "Open it," Adrian commanded. Miller flipped the leather case open. Inside, stamped into the heavy brass, was the unmistakable gold star of the United States Secret Service, set above a federal photo identification card that bore Adrian's face. Below his name was his title: Supervisory Special Agent, Presidential Protective Division. Miller froze. All the color instantly drained from his face. He stared at the badge, then looked up at Adrian, then back at the badge. His brain, clouded by prejudice and adrenaline, refused to compute the information. "This," Miller stammered, his voice cracking. "This is fake. It has to be fake." Adrian slowly turned his head as far as Jenkins' forearm would allow, locking eyes with the young officer. "Officer Miller," Adrian said softly, the quiet intensity of his voice carrying more danger than a scream. "If you think that badge is fake, I invite you to call the field office in Chicago. The number is on the back of the ID. But before you do, you should know that my biometrics are linked to that firearm you just unholstered. The moment it was removed from my person without my thumbprint on the retention mechanism, a silent distress signal was sent to the local field office. You have about 3 minutes before this bank is swarming with federal agents. Now take these cuffs off me." Officer Jenkins froze. The heavy, oppressive weight he had been applying to the back of Adrian's neck instantly vanished. He took a stumbling step backward, his eyes wide and locked onto the gold star glinting in the harsh fluorescent light of the bank. The silence in the Heritage Trust lobby was absolute, broken only by the ragged breathing of Officer Miller, who was still holding the Secret Service credentials as if they were a live grenade. "Take the cuffs off," Adrian repeated, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The sheer gravity of his command sent a physical shudder through both local cops. I... Miller stuttered, fumbling for his cuff keys. His hands were shaking so violently, he dropped the small silver key onto the marble floor. It landed with a sharp clink. "Miller, what are you doing?" Caleb Caldwell hissed from his safe distance near the teller counter, oblivious to the reality of the situation. "Get him out of here! He's obviously lying!" Adrian slowly stood up straight, turning to face Caldwell, while Miller scrambled on the floor for the key. "Mr. Caldwell," Adrian said, his eyes drilling into the branch manager. "You are about to have the worst Tuesday of your adult life." Before Caldwell could fire back an arrogant retort, the front glass windows of the bank vibrated violently. The deep, guttural roar of high-performance engines shattered the quiet of the Oak Brook suburb. Through the large plate glass windows, Caldwell, Patricia, and the stunned customers watched as 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans jumped the curb, coming to a screeching, aggressive halt directly in front of the bank's main entrance. They weren't local police cruisers. They had no light bars on the roof, just flashing red and blue strobes embedded in the grills. The doors flew open in perfect, terrifying synchronization. Heavily armed men and women wearing dark tactical vests with USSS and police emblazoned in bright yellow lettering poured out. They moved with the terrifying, lethal precision of operators who guarded the highest office in the land. "Federal agents, nobody move!" A voice boomed as the heavy bank doors were thrown open. Leading the charge was Special Agent Robert Higgins, a barrel-chested man who had served alongside Adrian for 6 years. Higgins swept the room with an M4 carbine lowered at the low-ready position, his tactical gaze instantly locking on to the 2 local cops, and then onto Adrian, who was still in handcuffs. Higgins's face morphed from professional intensity to absolute murderous fury. "Drop the weapon!" Higgins roared at Miller, who was still holding Adrian's unholstered Sig Sauer. "Drop it now, or I will put you down!" Miller shrieked, instantly tossing the firearm onto the floor, and throwing his hands so high into the air, he nearly pulled a muscle. Jenkins pressed himself against the wall, his hands up, his face drained of all blood. Within seconds, 4 Secret Service agents had swarmed the 2 local officers, kicking their legs apart, stripping them of their duty belts, and forcing them to their knees. Agent Higgins marched directly up to Adrian. He holstered his sidearm and pulled out his own set of keys. "Dave, you good?" Higgins asked, his voice tight with barely controlled rage as he unlocked the steel cuffs. Adrian rubbed his wrists, his face a mask of calm professionalism. "I'm fine, Bobby." The response time was solid. 3 minutes flat from the holster distress signal. "We were at the Chicago field office processing the Geneva Summit paperwork when the alarm hit the system," Higgins explained, eyeing the 2 terrified local cops kneeling on the floor. "We thought you were taking fire, Dave. What the hell is this?" Adrian turned slowly. He pointed a finger first at Officer Jenkins, then at Officer Miller. "Unlawful detention, aggravated assault, civil rights violations, and illegal seizure of a federal firearm." He then turned his finger toward the glass-walled office, pointing directly at Caleb Caldwell. "And him? Filing a false police report, and quite possibly wire fraud." Caldwell's smugness completely evaporated. He looked like a man who had just watched his own obituary print out on a ticker tape. "Wire fraud?" he squeaked, his voice cracking. I was just following security protocols. He looked suspicious." Adrian walked over to his firearm, which an agent had cleared and placed on a side table. He seamlessly reholstered it, sliding the leather badge case back into his hoodie. He walked slowly toward the teller counter, stopping inches from the glass. Patricia, the teller, was openly sobbing. "Suspicious," Adrian repeated, savoring the word. "I'm a 20-year veteran of the United States Secret Service. I possess a top-secret SCI clearance. I guard the President of the United States. But I walk into your bank wearing a hoodie to access my own legally deposited funds, and you bypass your own corporate authorization center to call 911. It was a large amount of hatch," Caldwell pleaded, stepping backward. "You can't arrest me for making a mistake." "Actually, Mr. Caldwell, the Secret Service doesn't just protect the President," Adrian said, a dangerous, knowing smile finally touching his lips. "We are the primary federal agency responsible for safeguarding the nation's financial infrastructure. Bank fraud is our literal jurisdiction, and while I was standing here, letting your officers abuse me, I had a lot of time to think about why you were so desperate to stop me from withdrawing $85,000 of fully cleared funds." Adrian turned to Higgins. "Bobby, I want a federal freeze on this specific branch's operations immediately. Get Agent O'Connor from the Cyber Fraud Division on the line. I want a full forensic audit of Caleb Caldwell's localized ledger." Caldwell's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of Patricia's desk to keep from collapsing. The sheer panic in his eyes confirmed Adrian's tactical hunch. The twist wasn't just that Caldwell was a racist. Caldwell was a thief. As a veteran investigator, Adrian knew that banking systems were automated. When an $85,000 wire transfer cleared from a title company, as Adrian's had from the sale of his Virginia property, the liquidity was guaranteed by the Federal Reserve. There was absolutely no mechanical reason for a branch manager to intervene unless the branch's local cash reserves were inexplicably short, or if the manager was manually floating large client deposits to cover bad bets elsewhere. Caldwell had been using the classic security hold excuse as a smokescreen. He routinely profiled clients he believed lacked the legal resources to fight back, specifically targeting minorities and the elderly, flagging their large transfers for fraud review. While the funds were locked in a bureaucratic limbo, Caldwell was siphoning the interest and temporarily redirecting the principal into a shadow account to cover his own illicit options trading. When a black man in sweatpants asked for $85,000, Caldwell thought he had an easy mark. He assumed he could intimidate Adrian, delay the withdrawal by a week, and use the cash flow. He assumed wrong. Within 30 minutes, the bank lobby had become a makeshift federal command post. The local Oak Brook chief of police, William Bradley, arrived on the scene, practically sprinting through the doors. When he saw his 2 officers disarmed and sitting on the floor surrounded by heavily armed federal agents and recognized Adrian's credentials, Chief Bradley looked physically ill. "Agent Cole," Chief Bradley began, sweating profusely, extending a trembling hand. Words cannot express the profound apology I owe you on behalf of my department. These officers acted completely outside of our training and policy." Adrian didn't take the hand. He looked down at Miller and Jenkins. "Your officers didn't ask for my name. They didn't verify my ID, which was sitting in plain sight on the counter. They escalated immediately to physical violence and drew a weapon on an unarmed, compliant citizen because of the color of his skin. If I wasn't carrying a federal badge today, Chief Bradley, I would either be in a jail cell right now or the morgue." Chief Bradley swallowed hard, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe his forehead. "They are stripped of their police powers, effective immediately. They will be suspended without pay, pending a full Internal Affairs and Department of Justice Civil Rights investigation. I swear to you, Agent Cole, this will be handled." "Oh, I know it will be handled," Adrian said coldly, "because the DOJ Civil Rights Division is already on their way. You can give them your statement when they arrive." Across the lobby, Agent O'Connor's voice rang out from the manager's office. She had plugged her federal decryption terminal directly into Caldwell's workstation. "Agent Cole, you're going to want to see this. He's got dummy accounts. He's been floating deposits for months. We've got over $3 million in unauthorized redirects." Caleb Caldwell was currently sitting in a rolling office chair, crying into his hands as Agent Higgins placed federal zip ties tightly around his wrists. "Caleb Caldwell." Higgins read the Miranda warning from memory, his voice booming over the sound of Caldwell's pathetic sobbing. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Adrian watched the scene unfold, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. The fatigue of the Geneva summit was catching up to him, but a profound sense of justice anchored him. He walked back over to the teller counter. Patricia was still sitting there, terrified, refusing to look at him. "Patricia," Adrian said gently. She flinched, finally looking up, her mascara running down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. He told me to flag you. I should have just processed the check." "You have a choice in this world about who you take orders from when you know those orders are wrong," Adrian said, his tone devoid of anger, but heavy with truth. "Do better." He reached across the counter, picked up his Illinois driver's license, and slid it into his pocket. 10 minutes later, the regional vice president of Heritage Trust Bank arrived, escorted by federal agents. Sweating and stammering, he personally printed the cashier's check for $85,000, waiving every conceivable fee, and handed it to Adrian with trembling hands. Adrian walked out of the bank into the bright afternoon sun. The 3 black Suburbans were still idling, securing the perimeter. Higgins walked up beside him, clapping a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You still got that house closing at 2 o'clock, Dave?" Higgins asked with a grin. Adrian looked at his watch. It was 1:15 p.m. "Yeah, Bobby, I do." "Want a federal escort to the title company?" Higgins joked, nodding toward the armored SUVs. "Make sure no one else gives you a hard time about your hoodie?" Adrian chuckled, a genuine smile finally breaking across his face. No thanks. I think I've had enough drama for my day off. I'm just going to go by my house. As Adrian Cole drove away, the flashing red and blue lights of the Oak Brook Police Department finally arrived, not to arrest a suspect, but to transport their own disgraced officers and a corrupt bank manager to federal holding. Adrian had walked into the bank a suspect. He walked out, having single-handedly dismantled a multi-million-dollar fraud ring and purged a police department of its worst elements, all before closing on his dream home. Did this story of absolute justice make your blood pump? Adrian Cole showed exactly what happens when corrupt authority meets a truly immovable object. No one should ever be judged or profiled based on their appearance, and seeing these arrogant antagonists face instant career-ending karma is incredibly satisfying. If you loved this real-life drama and want more intense, justice-served